Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic, and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. Usually with a podcast, I have a really specific idea of what I want to illuminate, and this one's a little different. It's more like field notes from some things going on in my life that I want to illuminate. So places that I'm struggling, and places that I'm using my shamanic tools, and places that I'm just doing my best to roll with the human experience. And so I just want to offer kind of a trigger warning up front. I don't usually do those, but I am going to talk about a cancer diagnosis for a family member. So if that's something that would not be the right thing for you to listen to right now, I just wanted to give you a heads up. So it's been an intense couple of months. As I alluded to in the heads up, I'm going to talk about heavy stuff warning. My mom was diagnosed with cancer about 6 weeks ago. And before that, there was this whole process of having symptoms and struggling with them and trying to figure out what they were and checking in with her and appointments. And for a variety of reasons, the possibility that it could be something as serious as cancer wasn't even on my radar. And so suddenly there was this significant impact and experience, and I've just sort of been paying attention to all the ways that this moves through my life, and how I'm leaning on my practices, and how I'm laughing at myself, and how I'm going back to old patterns, and how I'm dealing with things in really up-to-date ways. This has a lot of experiences sort of woven into the journey. So when my mom had the diagnosis, which fortunately looks like it will be very treatable, but as is often the case with a cancer diagnosis, has a lot of intense experiences between here and the hoped for and expected all clear. And in doing this journey, my sister, who lives next door to my parents, who's, bless her heart, handling the bulk of things, and like the most amazing designated adult you could possibly imagine. She is so effective. She's in amazing hands. But she had business travel, and so I ended up going out for a week to drive my mom to her chemo and radiation appointments and just provide general support and help. And one of the things that I really noticed leading up to the trip was how much my head was really loud about the whole thing. So there was fear. What will it be like to see my mom? She's, lost a lot of weight. She's gone through this really hard thing. And what will it be like to be an empathic, energetically sensitive person who, has some good tools with building shields and filtering, but how will it be to be hanging out for a 4-hour chemo treatment or those kind of things? And one of the things that kind of stands out to me in 2020 hindsight, having, had the experience leading up to it, gone to have the experience of providing the support that I wanted to provide and come back, is that my sort of fears of what would be hard about this were pretty unfounded, and there were things that were hard in completely unanticipated ways. But one of the ways that I've been using my shamanic work, particularly in regards to getting ready for this trip, was sending energy down the path to future me, because I knew I was going to have this really intense week. The appointments, counting the time change, and I'm not much of a morning person, I was needing to have my mom at appointments at times when I might or might not have woken up for the morning. And I was really committed to I'm going to make this happen, but I also had concerns about what it would be like without enough sleep, because that can really increase energetic sensitivity. And one of the things I really noticed was it seemed like sending past me, sending to future me that's now also past me. Hopefully that makes sense. But sending that energy ahead, plus just who I am now in the world, meant that a lot of the fears of not having enough stamina were unfounded. So one of the kind of vulnerable shadow things that can come up for me as someone who's been so wildly energetically sensitive and picked the overachiever emotional numbing strategies in my adolescence and, have a very carefully curated life for what aligns for me, for what really works for me. I have a lot of clarity and I defend sleep and I make sure that I'm really thoughtful about, where I'm going to stay when I travel and all of these kind of things. But one of the things that was a great discovery about the trip was that my story about sort of my lack of resilience and stamina and ability to move through complicated situations were largely unfounded. I slept for like the whole weekend after I got back, catching up, but even with very little sleep some of the nights and all of the things that happened, I was able to drive safely and be present and feel really good about what I was able to contribute. Obviously, there's a whole lot of the individual who's going through the health experience just sort of being on their own journey, and no matter how engaged their support people are, there's only so much that can offer. And of course, I have been working with my guides and doing journey, and I have some other people who we sort of do a ongoing healing share where we all support each other in different things. And we've all been working on it from the shamanic side. And personally, I'm a big fan of the combination of Western medicine and energetic work, especially for something that's anchored in the physical. I know everybody gets to choose. It's a very personal thing, but I've certainly had people that I've witnessed over the years in community try to treat something like cancer purely from an energetic perspective and seen that not be something that didn't end in their death in a fairly short time. To be a little bit blunt, I was trying to find a good euphemism, but sometimes I think just accuracy is the way to go. And as someone who, works energetic angles all the time and really uses a lot of intention and focus and moving and aligning energy, it's just that when something has come into the density of something like being a tumor or being a blockage in the heart, it's not that we don't get any stories of spontaneous healing experiences, but if we look at those statistically, it's not the norm. It's not what usually happens. So huge fan of absolutely all the shamanic healing that can possibly go on to this being in process, but also really using the most up-to-date medical care. And one of the things that's really great about the situation and that has everyone feeling really optimistic about the prognosis is that Houston, Texas, interestingly, is a place on the planet that just has excellent, excellent cancer care. And so it's wonderful to have my mom in such good hands and getting to meet all of these providers. And they were so warm and kind and supportive. That was a really beautiful part of it. And as far as the sort of concerns I had about being present in the waiting room or in the treatment room with my mom, that went a lot better than I was afraid of. I was able to use my psychic shields and protection and energy filtering in a really effective way. It helped, of course, that the facility is beautiful and modern, and there's a lot of natural light and comfortable chairs, and they've just really created a beautiful environment to navigate this really hard thing. And at the same time, it was kind of a cool update because I have so many formative experiences of just being really melted down in energetic overwhelm. Like, I think I was, 11 or 12 when I had to come back from horse summer camp in a beautiful place because I was so homesick. I just didn't stop crying. And I wasn't even asking the adults to go home. I was just trying to manage my emotion. And unlike the normal kids who cry at night when they feel a little homesick when everybody goes to bed, I was crying and having my eyes leak during the day, because that was when all the stimulus, if I could get, hunkered down in my sleeping bag, I was a lot more okay. So it's been a long journey, and it was just nice to see the parts of me that have some more resilience and have some more capacity to just manage my energy really carefully and thoughtfully and be able to really show up in a way that felt really aligned and was really important for me to do for what the relationship is and how I wanted to show up in it. One of the things, again, just total change of subject, additional field note, one of the things I've really been noticing in interacting with my mother is trying to stay really attuned to the contribution she wants. So she's really happy to hear from me. I can say I love you. I can say, is there anything I can do? I can empathize. But she really doesn't want to hear anyone say, "Oh, this is going to be okay," or "This is all going to work out," or "You're this much through your treatments," or those kind of things. And she was really pleasant with all of the staff, but when her nurse and doctor came in for one of the appointments, and they were like, "Oh, you're going to be through this in no time," she was just kind of giving him a fisheye stare of like, I don't appreciate that. That's not what's happening with my body. She didn't say anything. It was all kind of nonverbal, but I was just, hanging and letting her have her experience of interacting with them. And it was just interesting to just allow the social tension. And at the same time, I really have to watch myself, because one of my best tools that just isn't the best tool for everyone is to try to use my mind to organize information, to look at statistics, to look at the bigger picture, to, when I have something that, is a pain point or a point of frustration or a point of fear, there are a lot of ways I do reality checks and looking at it in different ways. And most of what I've been saying to my mom is just pure empathy. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. This sounds so hard. I love you so much. Let me know if there's anything I can do. How about if I, do this thing?" One of the projects was going through all of their expired food and throwing it away so that they would have room in their pantry, So that's all good, but just that tendency to kind of jump in with the tools that we might use when there's evidence that it's not helpful. And for me, this is particularly difficult. I have the degree in engineering, so I'm a consummate problem solver and, trying to optimize things all the time, even when there's no particular need. Plus, lots of people come to me for that wisdom and perspective. It's part of what I offer in my practice, but it's just been a really interesting thing to notice that this doesn't feel good to this woman who's going through this really intense, objectively awful experience, and watching how hard it is not for me to leap to trying to shift her experience, and instead, just allowing it to be the sucky thing that it is at this particular moment. And so it's just been something I've been paying attention to. And also noticing, for me, having higher reactivity and struggling more with things under normal circumstances. My mom is someone I would call if I were having a bad day. And one of the concepts that I think is really important for just emotionally intelligent relating is recognizing that the person going through the big thing, everyone in the many circles who are affected by that, pours energy into the people who are more impacted and then looks outside the circle for their support. So I have many magnificent friends who are holding amazing space for me, who are being so supportive and so kind. But there's just this shift of needing to be really, really focused on just really being in contribution mode in a way that I can manage, and my real genuine desire for that, and then dealing with my feelings outside, because of course right now, this person who's going through this thing doesn't have bandwidth to help me process how sad and scared I am about the fact that she has cancer, which is totally valid. But it's just a distinction that I think not everybody gets, and sometimes putting words to it can be helpful if you need to set a boundary of saying to someone, it's totally valid that you're really upset, but I can't hold space for you're upset about what I'm going through, because it's just a place where humans can accidentally get really, really messy when emotions are running high. And on that note, I just find that I'm really needing to watch my codependency. I have a whole podcast on codependency, and I talk a lot about how vulnerable we are when we're psychic, empathic, when we carry the archetype of the healer. It's like all the society things that, could make us that way in general get so much exacerbated. And I've done a lot of work on it. And, the vulnerability with the depth of the relationship I happen to have with my mother, which mileage varies enormously. I talked to lots of people about their mothers, and huge variation on what that experience is. But I've just really noticed that my desire to be present and be a really good ally as she goes through this is important. But at the same time, the discipline of being in my own life and being present at the times where there's just genuinely nothing that I can contribute or add to the situation. And so I've just really been working with needing to keep recentering myself, which leads me to kind of a funny thing. So I have a lot of smooth sailing in my life. I have a lot of feeling really supported in personal relationships, but also just in the general flow of the world. I often have flights that go through without a hitch. I often have, a whole array of things where my right relationship to the world, which is always my goal, creates a result of a lot of ease and elegance and right place, right time, and finding a way through and things working out. And I had some not inconsiderable hiccups on the trip in the first 24 hours of the experience. So my flight was delayed. We ended up sitting on the runway for an hour just because San Diego is just a really complicated airport to get things in and out of. And there were no mechanical difficulties, no anything. It just happened to be that the way air traffic control happened that day had a huge backlog of planes waiting to take off. And so we were in that line for a really long time. So I got in later. And then when I got to my Airbnb, it just reeked of cigarette smoke, which wasn't even on my radar. And even if it had been, it wasn't like the host was upfront about that. There was a whole discussion of when and how he added that smoking was allowed. But at the end of the day, it's something that I really don't like, and it gets in your hair and your clothes. 2020 hindsight, I wish I just left the Airbnb immediately. Just gone and gotten a hotel, but I was super tired. So I worked with it for a night, gathered up all my stuff, didn't sleep much that night, checked out in the morning, eventually, went to a hotel, had a lovely stay. One of the things that's really lovely and functional about my family that I really appreciate is normally I would stay with my parents, but I was just really clear that I needed some alone time. I needed a space to do my work, and just the better sleep without people moving around would be really important. And there was no friction, no pushback. They're like, we so support you in having what will work for you. We're so glad you're coming. So that was a really beautiful part of course you should have this. Of course you can still stay with us, but it's just a smaller house than the last one they had. And so anyway, it all worked out in the grand scheme of things. But I'd mentioned, gosh, I don't usually get thwarted like this. And my mom said something really insightful. She says, well, you've got all your magic on me. And she wasn't wrong. Like, everything related to getting her to treatments, like clockwork. We were early every single time. We hit no traffic. We didn't even have particularly people driving crazy around us. Like it was super smooth sailing in terms of everything that I was working with related to that. And I think it's just good wherever you are in life to notice when you start having friction. Some of it's just not personal. I think that there are just times when the collective gets really intense and there's more just short tempers and frustration and things just not getting combed through or working as smoothly. I know humans are bad at statistics, but I think you can still look at the statistics and say air travel is just not rolling as smoothly as it did a few years ago. There's a lot more complexity and delays and people behaving badly on planes and all that kind of thing. But it's something that I think is just worth noticing in terms of having this perspective on life, that when we're really in our center and our energy is flowing really well, it's easy to kind of influence the world around us. And I find that with traffic, if I'm more tired or internal or chewing on something or a little bit more depleted, not in a particularly harmful way, but just my energy is at a low ebb rather than a high ebb, which incidentally is one of my arguments with reality, that my energy does really ebb and flow. I don't have like a super consistent I could totally predict having this many spoons on this particular day, so I'm doing a lot of moving my life to follow the flow of, moving more dynamically when I have more energy and resting more when I don't. But I wish that were a little different. But I find that if I'm driving at an energy ebb, there's a lot more traffic chaos around me. And fortunately, knock on wood, not such that I'm having anything dangerous or particularly scary, but I'm more likely to see the, motorcycle where I'm like, please don't die on my car, or people cutting each other off, or, honking horns, or, a lot more tailgating, those kind of things going on around me. Whereas when my energy is like really open and clear, merges happen really gracefully. There's all this spaciousness, and I think that's just a natural thing where the more we're in our center and our energy is filled up and vital, we act on the environment around us. And so there are a lot of outcomes that are really aligned. But when our energy is more pulled in, there's just more chaos that gets introduced, and there's more opportunity for things to kind of act on us in different ways. And it's just a good thing to know. What's hard about this, of course, is my resilience and patience to roll with, an Airbnb that's felt awful, or my resourcefulness where it was all to say it was much more impactful happening on that trip compared to what it would have been on another trip or at another time or in another experience. And that sort of brings me to the next somewhat embarrassing, shadowy thing, which is I had these moments of being thwarted through this Airbnb experience. That was the biggest one. And I had a horrific day trying to get Airbnb support to talk to me. They just wouldn't respond. And I didn't know if they were going to give me another place to stay, or I needed to get a hotel. They were super unclear about that. And so I'd started a 7 a.m. conversation where they said, here, give us some URLs and we'll see what we can do about getting you another place. And many phone calls and messages later by 5 p.m. I'm like, look, I just need closure so I know where I'm going to stay. I could get a hotel room. I found hotel rooms. I just need to know that you're not booking me into something else. And so it was a very protracted process to get to that point on a day that I'd, also, sat with my mom while she was in chemo. So I was particularly activated about that. And there've been some other, points of friction on the way back through a technicality. The luggage that I thought was going to be covered with my credit card happened to, slip through the rules, and they were still charging me for baggage, and I have this enormous online school, this academy with all these courses because I am nothing if not prolific. And the academy had a cyber attack and went down, and I think, fingers crossed, it's finally back up, as of my recording this, which of course you'll be hearing a good deal later. But there was no real clarity about the path forward or the timeline. There were people wanting access to courses they'd purchased, people wanting to purchase courses, etc. So I was exploring these new platforms and these lifetime deals, and kind of all of this, like, things would work out and then they wouldn't. But the thing that I really noticed, which is kind of a old Katie pattern, was my desire to try to be heard by customer service representatives, where that really wasn't available. And one of the things that ideally, for the most of the time, I've onboarded more maturity with is not trying to be heard by people who aren't available to hear me. And customer service, they have a vested interest in making you feel heard, but that's really not particularly what they're up to. In fact, one of the people I was discussing things with kept using like AI to respond to me, and I'm like, this is so insulting. Yeah, so what I really noticed about having these arguments, so, there was the whole Airbnb and my wanting to argue with the company about how they handled my case, which was water under the bridge at that point, not the best use of my energy, or go back to United and complain about the baggage fee. Again, maybe I could get it comped with a support phone call, but time out of my life that I would never get back, not the priority. And then finally, this platform that basically said they wouldn't publish one of my courses after I'd gone through all the trouble of uploading it because they were, concerned about it. And I get it from the point of view of, I'm talking about, it's the one about clearing entities, which I don't recommend for anyone who isn't absolutely sure they have entities and this is a problem. But it's got some really specific detailed information because that's a demographic I work with. And if you're wondering if you have entities, your psychological and emotional and energetic outcomes will be much better if you don't go down the rabbit hole of trying to research this and such. So that's the disclaimer. But again, I was just in the midst of all of these other things and then trying to have a plan B for my school, really not wanting to go through hours and hours and hours of uploading recordings because it's just a very time-consuming process, and then having uploaded the entire course and having them tell me, no, we won't accept this. You have to, you can rewrite the whole thing with AI, and that would pass. And I was not willing to rewrite the whole thing with AI because I'd used really specific language that my clients use and didn't want to dilute or misrepresent what I believe is helpful in this, vulnerable, complicated situation. So I decided, okay, I've really gone through, I put in a disclaimer. The company said, oh, you put in this disclaimer. I put in the disclaimer. They're like, we still don't like that. Please rewrite the thing with AI. I'm like, I just told you I wasn't willing to do that. So I was very frustrated. So I'm just like, okay, I'm abandoning this platform, but I'm going to write a review that, expresses my feelings on the subject. And so I did. And then apparently the owner of the company ended up responding and misrepresented what had actually happened. He made very specific claims about how my case was handled. And he clearly hadn't engaged at all with the person who, had actually done the support. He didn't even glance at it. He just fabricated an idea of that. And it kind of comes down to the like, honey, I can't come to bed yet. Someone is wrong online. This random person misrepresenting something I'd said, so not important. And yet my brain was like, here's how I could argue it. Here's how I could say it. Here's the most cogent way to prove that, I'm in the right, which is kind of a ridiculous undertaking. I did want anyone who's in the holistic health space who might be publishing a course to understand that this particular platform is, just really only interested in conventional credentials. So my being able to talk about everything that I've correlated about weight loss from working with clients in a shamanic setting for 25 years now, and the wisdom that I have to offer doesn't fit with their image because I'm not a dietitian and I'm not a psychologist, and therefore I am misleading vulnerable people in the population by saying, hey, here's a course where I have, shamanic wisdom about weight loss. So it's not even, I can understand, that particular worldview, and it's totally valid. That's not my demographic. That's not my clients. Those aren't even the courses I would buy when I'm looking for things. And it's valid. I was just super annoyed because I'd already invested money and a good bit of time only to find out kind of after the fact. But what I really wanted to kind of call myself out on a little bit and illuminate while still giving myself, kind eyes, I'm sort of laughing at myself, was how seductive in the midst of this time where everything is complicated. I'm in the middle of holding space for my mom and her cancer treatment journey, and I am trying to figure out the path forward for this online academy, much smaller thing, but there was just a long time of not really having a clear, this is absolutely the path forward. And now I have one, which is fantastic. I have a really clear picture, but I don't like lack of closure. And I'm in these, places where that's happening. And then there's the context of, bigger things happening in the world, like the bombs being dropped in Iran. And I'm, not saying anything for or against that, just that there's a amplification in fraught energy that goes with, this kind of stronger conflict that, may or may not emerge. It's kind of oh wow, there's something that's unfolding. And so when we have a lot of uncomfortable, open-ended, difficult emotions, I just really saw again how seductive it can be to get into arguing and being right and having my say, which the fantastic thing about the very detailed, I think you're way of giving advice is invalid and harmful, the great thing about getting that response to my review is it actually just did a really terrific job of illuminating for someone who's, perhaps a yoga instructor who wanted to teach meditation, or, just all of these, things that holistic practitioners who might or might not have conventional credentials might want to offer. If they read the response, the company did a way better job than I ever could have done of providing a warning of what did and didn't work for them. So the review had already accomplished what it needed to, which is, if anyone cares to read it, it'll help them make really good choices. But I just really noticed how I would be having a conversation where I'm like, Katie, honey, put that down. You finding the perfect words to, respond to, this travesty of being misrepresented online is not a good use of your energy. Put it down. This isn't the priority. This isn't what matters. This isn't what you want to spend your energy on. And gosh darn, 5 minutes later, I'd be chewing on it again. And I think that sort of low level righteous indignation and really low stakes conflict, because I really, really don't like conflict with people who matter to me. And sometimes that's the order of the day. And it's just kind of an embrace the suck thing, because there's not really a path. You can refrain from escalating, but there are times when relationships end. But arguing with customer service and being right and having your say and expressing your indignation is, it's a low stakes kind of self-righteous. It involves the mind really thoroughly. So other things you might be thinking about, it kind of pulls you away. And I just really noticed the seductiveness. And yours may look different. You might squabble with people or be annoyed with a waiter, or, all of these other things. And certainly big life events erode the length of our fuse. So when we're already dealing with contemporary things in our emotional stack, our reactivity goes way up. And humans are good at dramatic stories and bad at statistics. So it can feel like the whole world is picking on us, which fortunately, with my particular perspective and the practices I have of turning things over for a lot of perspectives, I didn't feel like done wrong by the universe or anything. I was just really aware that there was a lot of energy that went into some of these circumstances going off at a point where my personal budget to deal with them wasn't as high. And in the fullness of time, everything came through. I feel really good about how I showed up during the trip. It was really aligned with who I want to be in the world and who I want to be in the relationships with my parents. And I'm happy to be home, having made a contribution that was meaningful at a time when there's a whole lot that nobody can do. Nobody can really help with in terms of someone else's journey. So all of this is just, again, kind of field notes of ways I'm using my tools and ways I'm going back to old patterns and ways that I'm trying to be heard by strangers and ways I'm being compelled by petty things that have emotional charge, rather than really having the through line of what really aligns with what I'm up to and what matters to me. And there's just a lot of experience associated with this. But one of the things that I think is sort of valuable to pull through and sort of what I would want to go back and say to my past self is, I tend to be kind of a worrier about the future. And, even when I go on a magnificent trip, it's really common for me to have low-level anxiety before I go. It often shows in over-optimizing what I'm packing and overthinking things through, which when I'm on the trip, I tend to have these really elegant, smooth experiences because I brought food along that I need and all the gear and the clothing, and there's a lot of ability to just pivot and deal with things. So there's sort of an acceptance of like, at the end of the day, I'm going to spin my wheels a bit preparing for a trip and overthink it and have some fears come up. But then when I get there, I'm probably not going to have a lot of challenge. And for some of these big things in life, a lot of my clients have been through the sort of rite of passage that, is, fairly universal of losing parents. And some people have that on the horizon. But I just noticed I was much more worried about how it would be. And I'm not going to say it was easy. You may know that when they complete treatment, they ring a bell to celebrate that you've completed chemo or completed radiation. And while I was in the waiting room for my mom, there were 2 people who came out and did it. And the first one, I teared up at the time, and then I was okay. The second one, my eyes started leaking, and I just couldn't get him to stop. So then I go into the restroom, and I'm sobbing as quietly as I can in the restroom and just being like, well, alrighty, there's some built up emotion here. And I was really tired by that point. I'd done a lot of chores around the house for my parents because that was something my mom genuinely wanted that I could contribute, plus the getting up early and the driving and all the things. And at the same time, it really wasn't that bad. I was just like, oh, wow, my eyes are really leaking. Okay, something really wants to move. All right. It was just interesting, on the shuttle back after dropping off my rental car, I'm I have some downtime in the middle of the travel. And again, my eyes are just leaking, not really thinking about anything, just leaking. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's kind of nice that all these people are on their smartphones because random strangers trying to provide comfort would be very kind, but more likely to be awkward. So yeah, I could just sit here and have this eyes leaking experience. And so it goes. So I would love to sort of tell all of us that some of the things that we dread that are on the horizon that seem like they will terrify and overwhelm us and be really awful are just these moments in our journey that we move through. And some of them have a longer duration. 2025 has been an interesting year. I lost my cat a few months ago, who was 18 and a half years old. So she just really rocked a long and very healthy life. And over the years, I'd had so much time where I worried about making the right choices for her at end of life and whether she would suffer and all of those kind of things. And it was a very intense, couple of weeks where, she went into the decline, and then I made the decision to have her put down in a very short order. And that's another place that I could really lean on my journey work of talking to her soul in shamanic reality, talking to the guides. And at the point I made the choice, her symptoms have gotten more acute from kidney decline. And the guides, just said, there's really nothing in the destiny path in front of her that is particularly about pleasure, enjoyment, or richness or quality of life. It's just a downward spiral. And I went, okay, that's super clear information. And we don't always get that kind of clear information from our guides. It's a lot harder to journey, especially for ourselves, or hear our guides when emotions are running high. But at the same time, I kind of wanted to go back to previous me and be like, hey, you got through this. You were present. You moved through. You responded to the situation as it unfolded. And the nice thing, again, about being a shamanic practitioner is the kitty cat has been very available to talk to me when I want to talk to her and connect with her. And she's just really satisfied with the experience that she had and not hung up on anything, that I could possibly second guess. And so there's kind of this takeaway where our younger, perhaps more psychologically and emotionally stressed version of ourselves, all of what we've done in terms of personal growth and learning and healing, can really have us moving in a new way through a challenge that is a lot more functional and effective than anything we've experienced from ourselves before, because there was a lot more grace, with this cat compared to the 19-year-old cat who quite a number of years ago reached her end of life. Who I was, a decade later in this experience was really different. And I think that every time we invest in personal growth and healing and cleaning up emotional debt and all of these tools, we really give ourselves a gift when we arrive at these intense moments in life. And we can send energy to future us if we know we're going to go through something complicated. But at the same time, I just want to keep strengthening the muscle not to leak my energy with the fears and kind of the outdated ideas, while still using everything really contemporary that I know about myself. So for example, getting a separate place to stay was really functional for everything that I was balancing and working with, because the psychic quietness of just getting to be in a space that I could put protections around and be in really, really helped me out. So anyway, lots of random field notes. I hope there's something in here that's supportive, but I just thought it would be interesting to share kind of how some of this stuff weaves through life experiences, and how, sometimes it's just bumpy and hard, even if we have a lot of connection to spirit and are working with things in really effective ways. So if you're still listening, I hope there was something that was supportive for you in this rambling, subject jumping kind of discussion. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.